Nellie Gertzberg-Selby.
Hi, Alex Gertzberg.
How are you?
Well, I'm pretty good. I'm happy to be here.
Thank you for being our substitute guest host. Or is that's not the right word, substitute. Our fill-in? Alternative? Our, like, what was it when Jay Leno filled in for Johnny Carson? What was it called? There's a
I
word
think it was
for
a
it.
guest
host. That's it.
I'll
Thank
be
you.
the guest co-host.
Thank you for being our guest host today, Nellie.
Oh, I'm happy to do it.
You, being the producer of the show, know a lot about it, probably a lot more than I do. So I'm sure you'll do just fine.
Well, you say that, and then something will go wrong, and it'll be my fault.
No pressure.
Thanks.
You'll be great. So, Nellie Gertzberg, did you have a good day today?
Oh, it was very productive.
It was.
You gotta love a productive day. We got last week's episode posted.
Right.
With Keith Latour.
Right.
I think that went pretty well. And there were some other things that happened today.
I don't know that a lot of people know that you are one of the outstanding employees of the Gertzberg Law Firm, right?
Well, I spend some time doing that. Yes.
Are you enjoying your time at the Gertzberg Law Firm?
I tell you what, I really appreciate the flexibility that working here offers me, being a new mother.
Would you say it's the best job you've ever had?
Sure.
Would you say it's the greatest
to
place?
To your face? I absolutely would.
Would you say it's the greatest place to work in Northeast Ohio?
Okay.
All right. Would you say you've never had a better boss than you do at the Gertzberg Law Firm?
Well, to your face, absolutely. Alex, how was your day?
It was fantastic. I've been doing this thing where I designate a week in advance. I designate each day of the week either a free day, a buffer day, or a flow day.
I think you've mentioned this on a previous previous episode. What kind of day was today?
Today was going to be a buffer day, but it turned into a flow day, or a flow day, or a focus day.
It seems like you have to be flexible with these kinds of plans.
You should be prepared to change them, but that's actually part of my problem, and that is what this time system is intended to avoid, right? See, my problem is I see a shiny object or a fire alarm
or a squirrel
and I'm rushing to get there to put out that fire or whatever. And I think that that's okay when you're going from so a buffer day is when you're supposed to be clearing your desk and clearing out your emails and making sure and delegating and making sure everyone's doing what they're supposed to be doing.
Which you were supposed to do today.
Right. A focus day is where you are spending 80% of your day working inside of the thing that you love to do the most, right? And the thing that makes you the most money.
Alex, what's the thing you love to do the most?
Nellie, I'm glad you asked.
Is it clearing your throat into the mic?
Clearing my throat. That's number one.
Okay. Cut that out. Okay.
I'm very phlegmatic at the moment.
It's not getting cut.
Phlegmatic. No way. Leave this in.
What's your favorite thing to do?
So, all right. So I think that, you know what? It's interesting. I actually had a revelation about that. So in terms of just pure things that I'm excited about and things that I look forward to and can't wait to do when I wake up in the morning, those things tend to be writing creatively, speaking publicly, right? Communicating, planning things. I really enjoy planning things. But then,
we're planning a party.
We are.
For Sunday the 28th.
Do you think this will be out before then?
We'll see how it goes. If there aren't a lot of edits to make, then potentially.
If not, you guys all missed a great party.
You'll have to join us next year.
Right. But if it gets out before then, come to the Gertzberg Law Firm on Sunday,
May 28th.
That's Memorial Day Sunday from 3:30 to 6:30, and listen to some really good funk music.
You know, we can post it on Facebook. It's definitely on the Facebook page for the law firm.
Right. But make sure you RSVP so we have enough food.
Right. I interrupted you, though. You were saying things
Yeah.
you love,
So-
including planning and speaking.
Yeah. So I had this revelation the other day, right? And I felt like you ever feel like I heard this phrase today, imposter syndrome.
Oh, I've heard that.
You have? I've never heard that before.
Well, I heard about it when I started teaching it. A lot of teachers, I think, experience that.
I think you're too far away from your
You
mic.
just turn it up then.
Oh yeah, I guess rather than interrupt the podcast to tell you that you're too far away from your mic.
It's okay.
All right.
The imposter syndrome, I have heard of that.
Yeah. Sometimes I feel like I have it. Sometimes I feel like a total imposter.
Well, a lot of experts feel that way too.
Do
if
they
that makes
really?
you feel better.
Yeah. Like it's and it's usually accompanied by dreams that I can't find my class where I'm trying to
Yeah.
get to in high school.
Yeah.
Right. And yesterday I had a variation of that one. What was it?
Or just being unprepared.
Yeah.
Or
Totally.
not having any clothes on, kind of thing.
Yeah. It's never that. It's all, but,
Only in real life.
Yeah, man, there was another one, though, where I was totally unprepared. But anyway, I felt that way last week at this event that I went to where I was looking around and I was in a room filled with really successful business owners. And I was like, what the hell am I doing here? Like, I do not belong here. These guys all have their stuff together.
Will you
way
be
more.
comfortable if they hear you saying this? If they listen to the podcast? I guess it's a
Well,
compliment to them.
Well, no, but it's interesting because I vocalized this. I said this, and they were like, wait a second, dude. Do you not remember this essay contest that you just did that had like thousands of participants and hundreds of professionals and business owners and judges, and you raised $13,000 and gave it all away to a high school student? I was like, yeah, I know, I totally forgot about it. And they were like, don't you manage complex litigation? And I was like, yeah, I guess I forgot about that. And they're like, didn't you start a law firm 4 years ago?
It's okay to toot your own horn.
Well, but the point is, but I went backwards from there, right? And I wrote a really long journal entry where I reconstructed these complex events and organizations and things that I've put together over the years, and I was like, I think it's clearly all just in my head, right? This sort of inferiority complex that I bring to the table when I'm in a room filled with people that I consider to be very successful.
You're probably not the only one.
Yeah. But the point is, I'll wrap this up
Please.
into what my original point was. I backtracked it all the way back to Iraq, right? So so in Iraq, it's 2003, and I'm logistically responsible for bringing 160 soldiers from Iraq to Kuwait, back to Iraq in a 5-day period. There are hundreds of moving parts, thousands really, and making sure that everything gets there safely and efficiently. And that was sort of the beginning, or that whole experience of like this thing that I realized I really love doing, which is organizing movements, right? Organizing large productions and projects and things like that. And so I added to my list of things that I consider to be focus activities, managing large organizations, right? Come on in, Nate. Nate Haskell, ladies and
our
gentlemen.
guest has
Come on in.
arrived.
Yeah, you came just in time. Yeah, but this is called a rolling start.
And did we decide that it would be our guest who
seat.
delivers the legal tip today?
It is. Well, we did.
I have something in my car we might need for the podcast.
Is it a trumpet?
It's trumpet related.
Perfect.
I can't wait.
I'll be
Perfect.
right back.
All right.
So, Alex, who is our guest today?
Our guest is Nate Haskell.
Who is Nate Haskell?
Nate Haskell has been a serial killer on CSI for the last 3 seasons.
Not that Nate Haskell.
Yeah, he's going to be sitting right
No.
here.
It's a different Nate Haskell.
3 seasons.
That's just a coincidence.
That's true. But apparently there is a Nate Haskell on CSI who is a serial killer for 3.
Coincidentally.
Yeah, no, our Nate Haskell is a corporate and securities lawyer here at the Gertzberg Law Firm. He's been with us for a number of months now, and
I hope you can explain to me what securities law is.
Yeah, it's
Because
fascinating.
I don't know anything about it. But I think there's other things we also want to know about him.
Yeah, he's a musician.
He is a musician. He went to
Yep.
go get something music related.
Yep.
And he was a music teacher. And you should ask him how he got into practicing law, because he'll have a good story for that, I think.
I'm interested. That's true.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he's really into nonprofits. He's a giver.
We'll definitely have to ask him about that.
And here he comes, ladies and gentlemen,
Yeah.
bringing with him some implements, some
He has
instruments.
I didn't bring my trumpet, but
Well, you could fake it, right?
Is it? Hey, let's try to guess what it is. So Nate brought in a bag, like almost like a mail pouch. I got the exact same one. Like you put it. Hold on, don't tell us what it is yet.
Is it a record player?
Is it an instrument?
It's instrument related, he did say.
Is it a book?
It's books.
Oh, it's books.
It's some interesting books and recordings,
recordings.
actually.
Are we going to be able to play them?
If we have a CD player, we might.
We're not going to be playing any recordings today.
But we can edit it in,
I was
potentially.
afraid of that.
Yeah,
Maybe.
Yeah.
that should be fun.
Do you want some Cleveland bourbon in addition to your coffee, by the way?
Maybe a splash.
Okay.
Maybe it
Is
looks
that
really
what a
good.
hot toddy is?
Oh yeah. Do you want it in your coffee? Yeah.
No, thanks. A hot toddy's
Maybe
tea.
it's tea.
Tea and bourbon, right?
Yeah.
So
A gentleman
How's
made
that?
that
Is that a
for
good
me
spot?
once when I was
that's
ill.
that's good.
Okay.
I'm lightweight, so
You are literally a lightweight. You're very thin.
Quite
Nate
thin.
Haskell. You have the build of a marathon runner. Actually, I meant to tell you that.
Are you an
Did anyone
athlete
ever
at
tell
all?
you that?
I was in martial arts when I was younger. And I lifted weights on and off in high school and college, and I ran a little bit in college. I ran a 10K once.
So, Nate, we were just telling the 10,500 listeners that we have that you are a corporate and securities lawyer.
Mm-hmm.
Is that the most accurate description, do you think?
That's good enough.
Okay.
Can I get the elevator talk on what that means? Corporate, I understand, is related to business. Securities, I think of like, is it FCC? There's some like federal secure. Oh, SEC.
SEC, correct.
That's the only association I have with the word securities.
Right. Securities and Exchange Commission.
You can tell me more about it though.
I could.
The
You want me
elevator
to?
speech
You want my elevator speech
for the non-lawyers that are listening.
for the non-lawyers. So what does a corporate lawyer do? You know, this is an interesting topic. You often hear people say the term, well, I'm a corporate lawyer. And what does a corporate lawyer do? And I could make an argument that a lot of people say they're a corporate lawyer, and it's sort of a meaningless term. What does it mean, I'm a corporate lawyer? What exactly does that mean? I don't know. Because how many people, like, all they do is practice, like, corporate law or corporate governance? There aren't many lawyers who do that. So I think a lot of times people say, I'm a corporate lawyer. What they mean is, like, I'm a transaction lawyer. It means that they aren't the kind of lawyer that, like, goes to court every day. They're the kind of lawyer that handles contracts and handles business entity stuff.
Transactions can be between businesses, between individuals and businesses, or between individuals, whereas corporate refers to businesses.
Correct.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
A corporation, business entities.
Right.
So, yeah, so quote unquote corporate lawyer, you handle transactions and you handle corporate matters. And securities is, I used to get that question a lot. Like, what does it mean to be a securities lawyer? At Jones Day, when I worked at Jones Day, people would say we were called the capital markets group, and people would say, well, what's a capital markets lawyer? So what we did is basically SEC filings for publicly traded companies and debt deals and equity deals, like securities offerings for publicly traded companies. So a company's trying to raise money, or they're refinancing some debt or whatnot. We do all the paperwork so that they can go out and refinance their debt or issue new debt or issue new securities, meaning like common stock, preferred stock, whatever. So that's what a securities lawyer does. But there are also, there's private securities work to be done as well. It's like private equity companies, whenever they acquire a new portfolio company or they sell a portfolio company, there are securities issues. Now, those companies are not publicly traded. They're private companies, but there are still hoops to jump through to comply with securities laws.
Because it's about putting all the information out there and being sort of transparent.
Correct.
Okay.
And making sure that you're selling to people you're allowed to sell to.
This is my kind of language. I need short words and short sentences. I understand what you're
Yes.
saying. Yeah.
Nate, do you answer this question? Then let's do the legal tip because otherwise we'll never get to it.
Right.
Do you think that, as a general rule, the securities regulations that are currently on the books, as it relates to raising money for a medium-sized business, too much regulation, the right amount of regulation, not enough regulation?
I would say up until a few years ago, it was impossible for small companies to raise money efficiently. And
Because they would have to spend a ton of money on securities lawyers like yourself
correct.
to file the right the paperwork and not
Correct.
get in prison.
Yes, the rules made it cost prohibitive for small companies to raise capital. But the SEC passed new rules with the Jobs Act that made it a lot easier for companies to raise money.
When was that?
That was a very good thing. Well, some of the rules went into effect 4 years ago, and another set of rules for really small companies just went into effect last year. That would be what's called Regulation CF, or Regulation Crowdfunding, and that's crowdfunding for really small businesses. So businesses who are trying to raise up to $1 million, and the average equity raise in that space is in around $330,000, at least right now. So really startup companies, really small companies. Before then, it was almost impossible for them to raise money. It basically was impossible for them to raise money online or through any type of public or pseudo-public offering. Now it's doable.
Okay,
Which is
so
very exciting.
So you would say it's like the right amount of regulation for small, medium-sized businesses to raise money.
Yes.
Okay.
It's much better. It's a law that should have changed, decades ago. Well, at least years ago, and finally, it's changed.
You just gave a talk on this topic, didn't you, a few weeks ago? Right?
I did.
You did. Did that go well?
It went well. It was interesting. I was asked to speak on crowdfunding, and it turned out that some nonprofit organizations decided to attend, and I got the heads up about that ahead of time. And I did a presentation on crowdfunding that included both for-profit and nonprofit issues, which they're completely different. It's a completely different set of rules that governs how nonprofits are going to crowdfund. So it was tough to squeeze both sides into one presentation. Those are topics that are better addressed sort of separately.
So potentially, if somebody wanted to have you come and give a talk, they should specify if it's for-profit or nonprofit focus.
Yes.
But you are available to do that.
I'm available to do both.
Good to know.
Yes.
All right, let's do a legal tip. So here's the scenario, right? Nelly wants to open up a new business specializing in
I'll sell hula hoops.
hula hoop sales
Sure.
and manufacturing and distribution. And she is selling them out of her house currently using materials she buys from Joann Fabrics and assembles.
Home Depot. These are hardcore.
Home Depot, industrial strength, commercial grade hula hoops. She ships them outside the state of Ohio. She has a website in the state of Ohio. When the hula hoops travel nationwide, because Nelly makes exceptional hula hoops, the best hula hoops around. Some people like her service. Some people, frankly, just think they're lousy hula hoops. I don't know who these people are, but they're probably just cantankerous.
We don't have to talk about them. Why am I calling a lawyer?
Because you get some complaints from outside of Ohio, and they want their money back. And so they look on Nelly's website only to see, lo and behold, no terms and conditions, including any terms relating to where the dispute should be heard, whose law should be applied, who should pay whose attorney's fees in the event that they file frivolous lawsuits against Nelly. Whether Nelly has an LLC. Currently, it's just Nelly's Hulas.
LLC.
LLC. So, in that fact pattern, and I know right now, Nate, you're thinking, boy, I don't know where to start. I could think of at least 10 things that Nelly should do differently before peddling her hulas outside the state of Ohio, or even inside the state of Ohio, for that matter.
Top 2 or 3 of those 10 that you're thinking of.
I think we could rattle off all 10 of them pretty quickly and efficiently.
Right, go for it.
All right, you want to take turns? We can go back and forth, Nate. What do you think?
Wow, I was just sitting here thinking, boy, I'm not a cyber lawyer. I don't hold myself out as a cyber lawyer.
Oh, that's different.
But,
Yeah, that's true. I gave you a
Cyber
fact
lawyer
pattern.
sounds really futuristic, like Arnold Schwarzenegger's just cyber lawyer.
I threw a totally different fact pattern at you than the one that you're used to working with. Now, if there was a shareholder dispute there between Nelly and her partner,
But this is just a tip for the listeners who may have a home business.
that's true.
Help them out.
All right. Well, here, let me throw some out. Tell me if you disagree. Number 1, you should have terms and conditions on your website, Nelly. Number 2, those terms and conditions should have what's known as a choice of law provision, which says that in the event of a dispute, we're going to apply Ohio law and not Alaska law or wherever you're from. 3, there should be a dispute resolution provision in those terms and conditions that says that prior to you suing Nelly's Hulas, which, by the way, should be an LLC or some other entity that protects your personal assets.
I have a comment on that. We'll come back to that in a
All right.
moment.
Put a pin in that.
Right.
That
Coming
really
back to
should be the tip of the day.
Get
'Cause
an
Nate's
LLC.
here. And I don't know
Well, we're
anything
gonna have
about
Nate-
We'll get
that.
to it.
Nate's going to talk about that one.
Okay, but it's
Yeah.
the whole episode isn't the legal tip, so just move along.
Jeez, Nelly, you're a real taskmaster.
That's my
I wish
job.
Molly was here. I'm just joking. Okay, so the dispute resolution provision should say that prior to you, customer, suing Nelly's Hulas LLC, you have to give her a formal notice of your dispute, give her an opportunity to cure it, and if it is over a certain amount, say $10,000 worth of hulas, you have to have a face-to-face meeting and a mediation. Now, that's a little bit excessive in some cases, but I like it if I'm protecting a company. Was that 3? 4th, you should have an attorney fee shifting provision that says that if Nelly has to sue you to collect her charges that you have not paid, that she is entitled to receive the costs of collection. You should, how many is that? 4? 5? 4?
This all sounds like something you should ask a lawyer to do for you.
Well, yeah. I mean, there's a lot more that you should put into your contract like that, right? And Nelly should be operating not out of her house, but out of at least a P.O. box with a statutory agent. It should say that any offers made here are void where they are prohibited outside of Ohio. You should have
You hit on a dispute resolution, but you didn't really talk about venue.
Venue should be in Cleveland, Ohio. That's right.
Even
Thank
more
you.
important than
Yeah.
choice of law.
Yeah, no, you're right. Jurisdiction and venue should be in Nelly's hometown.
I'd like Nate to take over the legal tip
Yeah.
and tell me about LLC and why that even matters.
Good call.
So this is really, really simple. This is like corporate law 101.
Perfect.
Right. So anyone who owns a business should put that business into some sort of business entity, incorporate. That means form a corporation or an LLC or some sort of business entity that has limited liability. And the reason that's so important is if someone wants to sue you and you haven't done that, they really will be suing Nelly, and that means if they win, they can go after your house and all of your personal assets and all those things. So
It's a way to protect my personal property.
exactly. So if you incorporate, form an LLC, form a corporation, form something, you'll have limited liability. And if they want to sue you, they have to sue your company instead. And all they can get at are your company's assets and not your personal assets, unless you've done like a personal guarantee or something like that. But here's why I think this is interesting and worth talking about. Because you see online and everywhere LegalZoom and all these other companies and pop-ups on the web that say, incorporate, get your business incorporated, blah, blah, blah. You see an awful lot of those. And, someone who is unfamiliar with that issue might think that's just an attorney somewhere trying to make money, or that's some company trying to make money. And certainly there are a lot of companies out there trying to make money off this whole issue of, everybody ought to be incorporated. But I would tell any client who called, and I do tell clients who call and ask about businesses they're starting up, what's the first thing they should do? Hands down, the first thing that they should do is incorporate, because it's the most important thing that they can do, and it's also the cheapest thing they can do.
There's there's a lot of, I think, economists and historians that would argue that the limited liability company, in whatever form it is, the corporation, the LLC, a limited partnership, is the engine of capitalism, right? Is the incentive that gives private people the drive to take the idea that's in their head and productize it and try to sell it and try to make money off of it and compete with it. Because if they thought that their house was at risk or their children's college savings or whatever, they would take far fewer risks in the marketplace. And so, so it really
because your business can go bankrupt, and that doesn't mean your personal life goes bankrupt.
Exactly. It encourages risk taking, right? But not dishonest risk taking, right? So setting up an LLC to commit fraud, the LLC won't protect you. But if it's just, business judgment, then in most cases, if you're following the rules, and this is a whole nother podcast, right, about corporate formalities and making sure that you don't ruin your LLC, the corporate veil, as they call it, that will protect you in most cases. I'll say one more thing about that, right? There is a really good book out that I'm reading. I haven't been able to finish it, but it's called Sapiens by Noah Yuval Harari. It might be Yuval Noah Harari. That's it. You can't talk about the importance of the LLC in the American system without mentioning what Yuval Noah Harari said about it, which is that it is a total fiction. It only exists in people's minds. You can't hold an LLC. It's totally intangible, right? But it, like so many other fictions, like currency you can hold, but that's not what gives it value. It's the value that people place on it. It's basically just a mechanism for exchanging value. But the point is, those fictions,
like
right?
The whole stock market.
The stock market,
Right.
Another great example, right? From the beginning of time, that those kinds of fictions, voting, democracy, right? All of that is what has separated the animals who have progressed in their civilizations from the ones who can't progress. And the example he always gives is, you can give a tribe of chimpanzees this story about how they should all band together in exchange for the promise of this bonanza of bananas in the afterlife or something like that, right? Or something.
72 virgin bananas.
Yeah, but you can never organize chimpanzees that way because they don't have the capability to understand fictions. But you can do that with humans. And the ability to do that, the ability to follow a fiction, is what makes humans the civilized, progressive animal that it is.
I think it's our ability to adapt to every environment. We exist in every climate, every continent, and there aren't a lot of other animals that do that. That's just my opinion.
Anywho.
Great legal tip.
Nate, were you going to add anything more?
Well, the funny thing about this conversation is and you'd think that this was all planned, and it wasn't planned, but this conversation is a great way to pivot back into, like, we were going to talk about biographical stuff, like why'd you go to law school, things like that. Because that's actually one of the reasons I went to law school. One of the reasons I went to law school is I grew up with my father was always dreaming of starting his own business and investigated a lot of business opportunities. And never really jumped on any one and really got them going and off the ground. But my parents were both also relatively risk averse. And so I grew up sort of the same way. I'm sort of fascinated by business and fascinated by entrepreneurs and starting my own business, but also very risk averse and probably too risk averse to really start my own business. So
would you say risk averse in terms of only business and professional, or did that extend to like risk averse in the playground and personal life too? Is that a part of your personality, you think?
Maybe a little bit, but I mean, mostly I'm thinking risk averse in terms of money and finance and
Got it.
and business. Like how do entrepreneurs stick their neck out the way that they do? How does that work? Because it seemed so scary to me. I could never do it. So going to law school was incredible because you learn all the tricks, all the ways that you can manage risk through the law, and you learn how huge companies can be built, managing those risks along the way.
So that did you decide to go to law school in order to help you understand risk in that way, or was there something else that, because you were a teacher, right? So, and you taught music?
I taught music in Cuyahoga Falls High School, and also at a couple of elementary schools. I was the instrumental music teacher, one of the instrumental music teachers there. I also taught jazz history, jazz improv, music theory, a concert band, and but I had a martial arts instructor from earlier in my life who had gone on to law school, and when I decided I was going to leave teaching, I thought about doing an MBA, I thought about going to law school, I thought about a few different things, and I had a conversation with him, and he said, Nate, you should go to law school. You'd like it, you'd do well. And I started looking into it, and learning these things about risk and how to manage risk were sort of, I don't want to say an afterthought, an extra benefit. It wasn't the only reason why I went.
Can you give a more concrete example of what you mean by managing risk through law?
Well, the LLC, the concept of limited liability.
Like
that's
limiting
one.
the risk to yourself by understanding what LLC is.
Correct. And also sort of wondering, how the world works, knowing how many organizations are out there, how many different types of businesses, how many industries, and how many, people, and how does the world work? That sounds like a really strange question, but you sort of wonder, when you're a music major, you don't leave the music building. I was a music ed major. I think I took maybe 5 classes my whole 4 years that were outside of the music building. So you wonder sort of how the world works, and when you put that education with my upbringing, my experience with my parents, I had that question in the back of my mind. So you sort of learn a lot about that in law school. You learn a lot about real property and how that works, and you learn a lot about liability and lawsuits and how those work, and a lot of the mysteries that you would worry about if you were trying to start your own business start to dissipate as you see how you learn how the world works.
Were you thinking you were going to be a transactional lawyer from the start?
Not necessarily. I thought I was probably better off doing that than being in the courtroom.
Why?
I think arguing is not really my thing. I enjoyed, when I was teaching, I was up in front of people speaking a lot, and I enjoyed that.
Right.
But I thought maybe putting together contracts, things like that, would be a better use of maybe my creative abilities. And in hindsight, I think, creativity is used on both sides.
Sure.
Could have been happy either way.
Yeah, I don't know if I told you this. Somebody told me a few years ago that the difference between a litigator and a transactional lawyer is that a litigator's brain is drawn more towards storytelling, and the transactional lawyer's brain is drawn more towards jigsaw puzzles. Right?
I like analogies.
Yeah, except that certainly in my experience, the litigator definitely does a lot of jigsaw puzzles,
Yes.
So And I would think too that your being a musician puts you out there for, makes you a good candidate for storytelling, for that part of your brain anyway, right? And getting up there and performing a lot of theater in litigation,
Mm-hmm.
but you weren't really drawn to that.
No, I spent enough time on stage and speaking in front of people that I was drawn to that aspect of litigation. But I think I found out maybe the hard way in law school that I would never have been a really fantastic litigator because of my my sense of like equality and I'm such an objective person. Like I'm very analytical. I was drawn to like music theory and math and things like that when I was younger. And in law school, I found out pretty quickly that I was very good at writing objective research memos and doing objective research memos.
Well, that sounds like a jigsaw puzzle brain.
Exactly.
Maybe that was a good analogy to begin with.
Yeah, but here's what is when I actually got into practice at Buckley King as a clerk, and I also worked for 2 years there after graduating, was that I wasn't good at writing persuasive memos. And in fact, I remember sitting down and trying to write a persuasive memo for Rick Bain, one of their senior litigators, who's a great guy. And I wrote it, and he read it, and he really liked me, but he didn't really like the brief very much. He's a really nice guy. And he said, I don't quite understand how you write. And I kind of looked at him, and I'm like, well, yeah, I know what you mean. Because I knew I'm struggling I always see both sides of the picture, always. And that makes you a bad litigator because litigators have to be able to see the arguments that are going to help their client, even if their client really ought to be losing. When you're on the side, when you're a litigator and your client's sort of in a bad spot, like they're probably going to lose this one. You need to be able to think it like they're going to win and think what the best path is there and then write a very persuasive brief. And when you're as objective as I am, you aren't good at writing persuasively. So Rick Bain takes my brief and just rewrites a few sentences, rephrases a few things, and magically it is the persuasiveness is magnified tenfold because he is capable of thinking that way, and I wasn't.
Yeah, well, and it's definitely true on. It's really interesting that you say that because when I've negotiated M&A deals, right?
M&A?
Mergers and acquisitions,
Thank
right?
you.
So like buying and selling companies.
Mm-hmm.
I have had to consciously and deliberately check the litigator in me at the door. And I've seen how I get in my own way and my client's way sometimes by advocating too much and by not seeing where the win-win is, right? And I'm just pushing and pushing and pushing to I always I give this talk sometimes to business owners and chambers about contract drafting, and I say that when I'm drafting that initial form, that initial contract, right, especially a customer contract, I pretend like I'm the little kid in the sandbox that doesn't want anyone else to play with his toys, and I just try to grab as many of them as possible because for a couple reasons. Number one, by the time in most cases, no one's even going to read them. And by the time that anyone does, they're not friends with my client anymore, right? They're arguing about something. And when they're arguing about something, especially if they haven't read it, the other side hasn't read it, I want it to be in my client's favor. But that does not always serve my client well when it's an M&A deal, right? And they're just trying to get to the finish line. And I'm sitting there, like fighting for real estate, fighting for toys, So there is definitely that difference, at least in mindsets, between a litigator trying to be a deal lawyer and a deal lawyer,
I feel like this is a good time, unless you wanted to add to that. I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
This is a good time because I'm wondering about all the connections between these different areas. And we've mentioned martial arts. You're talking about like mindset and style. And I want to know what the connection in your experiences between your martial arts background and your practice of law. Is there something in your law career that you draw on your martial arts experience for, or that you feel is connected to that? Was the only connection was that your martial arts teacher said was also a lawyer, or was there more?
That was the main connection.
Yeah.
I get the same question. I've gotten the same question a million times about music. Like
Well, that was going to be next, but now I guess I'll just not ask that.
So here's so here's the thing. I used to look a lot at martial arts and music and how they're connected, and then I used to think a lot about music and law and how they're connected. And for me, there's right brain and there's left brain, and I think I became, since I started playing the trumpet and got into jazz improvisation really early on, like I want to say like 8th grade, I was already interested in it. I started learning and thinking about this left brain, right brain concept, and I started to draw a lot of parallels between sports, martial arts, and improvising. And I think I carried that into practicing law, where I can stop and think. I'm just very cognizant of, there are two sides of your brain. Some people use one side more than the other. Both sides are useful, and one's more useful at certain times than others. So I think about that a lot in everything that I'm doing. And I actually, when I was studying jazz improvisation, one of my teachers suggested that I get a book called Drawing with the Right Side of Your Brain.
I've heard of that. Yeah.
I have it, and I have not read it yet.
It's a great book. They have you do exercises like drawing a picture upside down.
Mm-hmm.
So for someone who isn't very artistic, and I wasn't super artistic, I had a little bit of drawing skill when I got the book, but they'll give you a cartoon type picture of Stravinsky, I think, like sitting in a chair. It looks sort of like a cartoon, and they tell you, okay, copy the picture, and when you copy it right side up, it doesn't look anything like the picture. And when you flip it over and copy it upside down and then flip your drawing back up right side up, you'll be amazed to find it looks a lot more like the cartoon than your first attempt.
My master's thesis was about the two hemispheres of the brain, and it was based on the right hemisphere seeing the big picture and the overall form, whereas the left side of the brain is more about the details. And the pieces rather than the whole picture. Mm-hmm. So maybe that's what's happening when you flip it upside down. You have to get the whole picture or maybe, I don't know, maybe it'd be the other way. But is that connection then an awareness of these two styles? And that's what martial arts gave you, because you have to have a lot of awareness of yourself and your body?
You have to have a lot of awareness, and you have to be able to react to things that happen. I mean, so in jazz improvisation and in martial arts, when you're sparring, you have to think of things to do, and you have to react to things that are done, and you have to be in a certain mindset to do that well. And I think that mindset is sort of it's a balance of right brain and left brain activity. And the cool thing about that book, Drawing with the Right Side of Your Brain, is it teaches you somewhat how to get into that mindset of using the right side. I mean, when I first started practicing the drawing and I was still playing a lot, I actually got pretty good at, when I felt I was not being creative and I needed to be more creative, I could actually just stand on stage, look at something, and look at it like, if I were going to draw that, how would I draw it? Thinking about that book. And it would get my brain thinking more creatively.
Just a brain exercise, really.
Yeah, and it's like the wavelength, the way your brain's operating, it just sort of shifts, and next thing you know, you're playing better.
Which martial art did you practice?
I studied something called we call it American Freestyle. My instructor had been at Tracy's Karate Studio, which is a big chain in northeastern Ohio, and they teach Ed Parker Kenpo Karate. So everything that we did was, and I actually started at Tracy's in Parma Heights in junior high. So our whole system was largely based on that, but he brought in a lot of other elements. He studied with a few other instructors outside of Tracy's, folks who they were not Kenpo folks. They did other styles. So what he taught was sort of a blend of a lot of different things, but we both got our basis in Kenpo, which is a pretty common.
How long did you do it?
Let's see. I started in 5th grade. I got my black belt. I want to say I was like a senior in high school maybe, and then in college I continued for a few years, really just teaching at that point. I wasn't really practicing, and I was never really competing. I was never really didn't go to tournaments, things like that. But.
And how long ago did you stop doing it?
Oh, wow. Well, I'm 41, so it's been about 20 years since I did it like regularly.
If you were accosted on Main Street in Chagrin Falls right now, do you think it would all come back to you as though you were like a Navy SEAL and you could kill somebody with, just like your thumb or whatever? Like, do you think it would all, like, you would just revert back to your caveman-like instincts from those days?
Well, so here's how that works. So your muscle memory never goes away. So there's no move that I ever did that wouldn't sort of come back to me, but you do lose your balance and you definitely lose your timing. You lose a lot of your timing. So the speed, it's sort of like playing golf or playing any very fast-paced game, that if you're out of it for a while and you go back and try to jump in, you find that you're pretty bad.
You're not conditioned.
Yeah. You're not a beginner, but your timing's pretty bad.
Right.
Speaking of timing, let's learn
Wait,
more
I'm
about
sorry.
music.
Can I have 2 follow-up questions?
Short ones.
Were there any? Did you ever seriously injure anyone in martial arts?
That is a good question.
No, I never seriously injured. I was almost seriously injured a couple of times.
What was the move that almost seriously injured you?
And what was the injury?
And was it at a bar? And were you defending anyone's honor?
It wasn't in a bar. We should talk about that though. That's a great topic. The actual use of this in so.
Well, we've got time right now.
I mean, I have to go, but it's okay. You guys can chat.
Really quick story. So the one time I almost was injured was in class. I was fighting someone who was a lot bigger than I was, and they were not as experienced, but they were big and they were strong, and they threw a kick at me, kept their leg cocked up like they were going to throw another kick, which I knew enough to avoid. Like, oh, they might throw another one. So I sort of did a fake, and he faked like he was going to kick again, and then he didn't, and he kept his leg up, and I thought, well, he's not going to kick a third time because he's not going to do that. So I lunged in.
Who does that?
Right.
3-time kicker. What's wrong with you?
So I lunged in, and he shot a side kick right into my jaw and lit me up. And I didn't pass out, but my speech was slurred, so I had to sit down for a minute. And so it was
from like a head injury.
He kicked me in the jaw, in the
How
side
does
of the
that?
jaw.
And that slurs your speech.
Oh yeah. So very important to know if you have no martial arts experience and not much experience with your anatomy. There are nerves all around your neck and your jaw, and it is very easy to get knocked out if someone hits one of those the right way. And I think like in boxing, a lot of times you see somebody like they'll say, "Oh, that guy's got a glass jaw." Well, no, maybe he just got hit in a nerve and it was lights out. It can happen very easily.
Interesting.
Glass jaw. Like
I haven't heard that phrase before.
Yeah, in boxing, you hear people say, "Oh, he's got a glass jaw." That means he gets knocked out easily when he gets hit in the head. But if you get hit in the right spot in the jaw, you're gonna be lights out. It's not.
Huh.
Wow. Are you done with your martial arts questions? Because we need time to talk about music. You and I are both huge music fans, and we have a musician here.
Let's talk about music.
Let's do that.
Moving on.
Mr. Haskell not only worked as a public school music teacher, but also as a freelance musician, playing the trumpet, not only classical trumpet, but jazz, Latin jazz, salsa.
Salsa is what you dip your chips into.
I can't break that habit. Salsa?
Is that true? Did I just make a real distinction, or did I make that up?
I don't think anyone says salsa. I think I do it because I'm weird, like an Ohio accent.
Yeah, you're right. No one ever says
that for either
salsa.
the condiment
Chips
or
music. That's right.
Salsa.
Moving on.
We'll come back to that actually.
So,
about that too.
Well, let's talk about
the
these.
pronunciation of salsa.
Oh, I like the way you say it. Those are some fun styles.
Yep.
Do you think that they are in your blood and your soul, and you have to feel it to play it, and it comes from somewhere deep down inside?
I'm not Hispanic, so they're not in my blood.
I guess that would.
Not that you know of.
Not that I know of.
Oh, but those are your preferred styles. They're all sort of. Oh, I guess they're not all that related. Latin,
They kind
jazz,
of
and
are.
salsa are all
Oh,
like the Hispanic styles.
Sure. Well, we could.
Who's your favorite?
My favorite trumpet player. I'm of the Wynton Marsalis
Ooh,
generation.
I like Wynton Marsalis.
And he's sort of polarizing in some ways in the jazz community.
Really, why?
Polarizing because he started writing a lot of got really into Duke Ellington sort of like mid-career and started writing things sort of in a Duke Ellington style. He also studied a lot of like King Oliver, and he's sort of at a time when people were sort of trying to move jazz forward. He sort of backtracked and started doing some things that are very historical, and some people think that he shouldn't have done that. He should have just kept pressing the art forward.
Oh, that's interesting. I didn't know that there was that kind of like controversy in the jazz world between like
A
the
little bit.
retros and the progressives.
Yeah, a little bit.
Interesting.
But it sounds like you support his decisions, being a fan of his.
I don't take issue. I understand what he did. I think in terms of, since I also have studied classical music, and it was such an important part of my life. And I think he's done a lot for education, and he's done a lot to he's done a lot for jazz music. Selfishly, I wish he would have sort of stuck with the pushing music forward and doing more innovative things, because the playing that I like the best that he ever did was what he was doing in the mid to late 80s, before he reverted to doing older styles. He was sort of, I don't want to say he was on the cutting edge, but he kind of was. I mean, his playing was really impressive back then, and he sort of took a step back when he started doing more of the King Oliver and the Duke Ellington styles. But I don't hold anything against him for doing that.
Did he ever come back, or did he get stuck in the past?
Well, I don't know. I haven't heard him play anything really in that sort of older, the stuff that I really liked. But that's okay. And he's still an incredible player.
What do you like? Kind of Blue or Spanish?
Sketches of Spain.
Sketches of Spain.
I would say I'm more of a Kind of Blue person.
Okay, I am too.
Ironically, you're both wearing blue.
Yeah, thank you. That's why I asked that question. No, I actually don't understand a lot of Miles Davis's later stuff. Like I feel like I'm lost in it. I can listen to Kind of Blue, and all of his colleagues, and for lack of a better word, like Charlie Parker and Coltrane and their old stuff. But when he started getting really like electric and disjointed and kind of like, I like how jazz musicians get frenetic and get breaking the boundaries and pushing out past what people consider normal. I like that, but I don't know. I feel like I'm not smart enough to understand what makes a lot of Miles Davis's later stuff interesting. I just don't get it.
I think there are a lot of people like you. I mean, there are a lot of musicians like you too. I mean, everyone respects what Miles did, but everyone within the 70s, the 70s are sort of thought of as sort of a lost time, a lost decade, in not just in jazz, but in a lot of in all styles of music. What happened in the 70s? There wasn't much good pop music. Like disco was sort of happening or starting to happen.
I think it was the heroin. Is that possible?
It wasn't, and yeah, the whole the fusion thing sort of. Fusion is what that's
right.
what we call that. So that was like late 60s, 70s.
Right.
It didn't sit real well with a lot of people, and it's harder to appreciate and it's harder to enjoy. So you're not the only one.
But then there are fans or historians that say that's really what made jazz, right? Like that is what created that era, right? Of jazz music it became a defining part of the history of jazz, right? And I don't know, I'll talk to people who are like, no, man, that was his best stuff. His best stuff was, in the late 70s, early 80s. I'm like, well, we must not be listening to the same. Either that or my brain is just wired differently than yours.
Yeah, I would disagree that's the best stuff, and I know a lot of musicians who would probably also disagree.
I'm not alone then.
I mean, so everyone respects Miles because he changed the direction of the music so many
Right.
times, and he had so many incredible recordings. But yeah, my favorite Miles Davis stuff is the sort of the immediately pre kind of blue
Yeah.
and immediately post kind of blue. So like the 50s and the 60s, things where there's still like a tonal center of some kind, although some of it is stretching, but yeah, the electronic stuff was
Yeah. And then you've got like the jazz that like Nelly and I listen to, right? So it's like like Fish will get into it sometimes, and Soul Live will get into it sometimes, right? It's like more
Like
it's
New Orleans
yeah,
funk jazz
exactly.
stuff.
Yeah.
Is
Do you
I
ever?
think what we're into.
Yeah, the New Orleans stuff is to me like the amazing. It's
Porter Jr. The
yeah.
Meters.
Does
Does that count as jazz?
I don't know. I was thinking of like Trombone Shorty is like have you ever heard of Trombone Shorty?
I've not.
Oh man, he's amazing.
I love a big CD burning party. I want to know what's in the bag.
Oh, it's not. It's okay. Well,
I'd
sorry.
like to know what's in the bag too.
it's not. It's not really that. It'd probably be more interesting to
Visual.
a musician or a music student, but
There may be some listening.
so I brought a few things. For the big thing that I brought. Well, so here's a blues in all 12 keys.
Okay.
Jamie Aebersold, if you're unfamiliar, that's a household name in jazz education. He makes play-along CDs. So there are CDs that have a rhythm section, but no no lead instrument and no singing. So that's sort of like, think of it like karaoke. So you can just put the track on and you can play along and you can practice your improvising, practice a tune you're working on, and you have your own band playing with you. So one of the toughest things about learning how to play jazz music is there are so few jazz musicians, but you can't practice without other musicians.
Right.
The only way to do it really is with a Jamie Aebersold album, or just playing all by yourself, which is
I'll post a picture of that book on the site.
right. So anyway, Jamie Aebersold. I mean, that's like I said, that's like a household name. There are hundreds of Jamie Aebersold albums. He's come out with he has books of they're all Charlie Parker tunes, books that are all Miles Davis tunes,
Right.
books that are all like whatever.
So you put the CD in, and he plays all the other instruments except the one you're playing, and you play along, basically.
Exactly.
Jazz karaoke.
Yeah,
Got it.
It's how young jazz musicians practice and learn how to play. So another thing I brought a copy of the real book, the quote unquote real book, and you probably heard of a fake book. A fake book in the world of jazz music is basically a book that has the chords and the melody to the tune, and jazz musicians will read that and in order to play a tune together.
Are there any Roberto Ocasio songs in there?
Not in there. No.
Who is he? Why don't you tell us about him?
Oh, let's
Nelly, queen of the segue. That was awesome. It's Robert Ocasio.
So
Did I pronounce it right?
Is it Roberto?
Roberto.
Oh, it is Roberto. You had it right.
Ocasio.
I'm sorry. Sorry, Nelly.
Question me some more,
My
Alex.
bad.
So the Roberto Ocasio Band was a Latin jazz group that played in Cleveland for several years. It started, I don't know when it started, probably the mid to late 90s. I joined the band in, I want to say 2001 maybe, as a trumpet player. Actually, right down the street here at Rick's Cafe was my first gig with the band. It was a Latin jazz and salsa group. We also played a little bit of smooth jazz-ish stuff. Roberto Ocasio was...
I've got a problem with smooth jazz, just for the record.
I do too.
Yeah.
But
Kenny G will never be played anywhere near me.
right on. Right on. Right on.
Just wanted to make the record clear. I do not advocate smooth jazz.
That's okay. So, like back in the early 2000s, there was sort of a Latin music was more popular than it is today. I shouldn't say more popular, but it was enjoying sort of like a push,
Right.
From people like Ricky Martin, Jennifer Lopez. When there are pop musicians who are out there playing, getting to be popular and playing Latin music, then that helps in other areas like jazz music. So Latin jazz got a little push from all that, got to be more popular. So The Roberto Castillo Band gigged quite a lot in the early 2000s. I mean, I played more during law school, which was 2002 to 2005. I probably played more gigs then playing with that band than I played like with just pickup jazz groups when I was a music teacher.
Did those dudes, was it their full-time job or did they all have jobs?
We all had jobs. And Robert he owned a store, a little corner store over on West 33rd in Cleveland. And yeah, we all had jobs, so it was just but for Roberto, I think at the band at its peak was playing quite a bit. I mean, he would go out and he played piano. He was a keyboard player, and he wrote a lot of the tunes. So he would play, 7 or 8 or 10 gigs a week. So it was sort of like a full-time job for him. But a lot of the gigs were just solo or duo or trio gigs. There were only a few gigs, usually in the summer, that had the whole band, the whole horn section, all the percussion and everything. It was up to maybe 10 pieces with everyone involved. Trumpet, trombone, saxophone, full rhythm section. We had a great singer at one time. And it's a very versatile band.
What happens with the band?
So Roberto, tragically, he passed away in a car accident in 2004. And the band continued for a few years under Rolando Pisana, who's a guitarist from Akron, who had joined the band, I think, maybe about a year before then. And Rolando's an incredible musician. He plays guitar and bass. He plays flamenco. He plays all kinds of Latin music and jazz, all kinds of stuff. So he led the band for a while, and when he left the band, I led the band for about a year. And at some point after that, the band sort of folded. But the band started a foundation, a nonprofit foundation that runs a music camp every summer, and I'm on the board of trustees of that organization.
Can I interrupt because I have to go?
Nellie, you have been a wonderful co-host. You've been a great guest host. Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Have fun.
All right. Tell Mom hello.
Okay, clean up after me.
All right.
Thanks for coming in, Nate.
You're welcome. Anytime.
All right, Nate.
I am right down the hall.
We're going to ask some lightning round questions. You ready for the lightning round?
I'm ready.
All right, lightning round questions. First lightning round question is, what do you think your biggest success has been?
My biggest success
as a human being, as a grown-up.
Not
necessarily as a grown-up, actually, just as a human. And you can't say your kids.
Nellie told me I couldn't say my kids, and that's unfortunate because and she told me I couldn't say my wife or my marriage either. Which
well, that's just those are everyone says that. It becomes less interesting to the listeners.
If I were allowed to say something, I would say both of those things. But since I'm not,
right,
I think I am. I am proud of the fact. That I had the guts to change careers.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah, not that I didn't enjoy teaching, and not that I won't go back to teaching someday, because I've often thought about it. And it's a wonderful profession, and I have the utmost respect for teachers. But the idea that taking a leap like that is a little bit scary. But I did it, and I did it relatively successfully. And that was one of the braver things that I've done in my life. So I pat myself on the back a little bit for having done that.
I would say joining the Gertzberg Law Firm over and above your kids and your wife and making that leap. But it is, I will say this, not dissimilar, right? I mean, you had a nice job going on at First Energy. You had a nice job before that, right? I mean, you've found opportunities and looked for opportunities, and in each case probably gravitated away from security and more towards change, and so you probably have it in your wiring, whether you realize it or not.
It's important to overcome fear and to reach out and stretch yourself.
Yeah,
it's important to stretch yourself.
Yeah. Okay, good. Next lightning round question is your biggest failure. However you choose to define that.
Biggest failure.
Joining the Gertzberg Law Firm.
I think I've always been very idealistic in with my goals and what I wanted to do, and I've always I haven't managed it well. I haven't managed like day to day, things like staying organized and keeping track of time, estimating how long things are going to take. I think I haven't conquered that yet, and I need to conquer that in order to be more realistic in what I'm going to accomplish and then actually get it accomplished from week to week.
What's interesting about that is that the client really gets a huge benefit out of you that way, because you don't bill all your time, right? You become very aware of the fact that you're drilling down farther than the client expects you to go. And so you don't bill all your time, and great for the client, right? But yeah, you are very meticulous and very thorough. So I guess that's good for everyone.
I guess.
All right. The third lightning round question. All right. So if Molly was sitting here, this is her question. What she asks our guests is whether there is or has been some female figure in their life, current or previous, living or dead, that has had a huge influence on them.
There are several. In almost every stage of my life, there has been a woman who was a very significant presence. So my trumpet teacher from 6th grade until 12th grade was a woman, Laura Joss. And I owe her everything, because I was one lousy trumpet player when I walked into her studio as a 6th grader. When I went to Baldwin Wallace and was majoring in music education, she had become, or like while I was there, she became one of the music ed professors. So she was one of my professors there as well. So she's a big one. She's extremely successful and a great role model. Also at one of my prior law firms, Corman Jackson Krantz, Susan Scheitzo was a tremendous teacher. She's a healthcare lawyer and just a very giving person. Incredibly, the most giving lawyer I've ever met, as far as giving her time and helping to mentor younger attorneys. She was fantastic. So those would be two real stand. Dr. Burris as well, another one of my Dr. Deborah Burris, at one of my professors for music ed at BW. She'd have to be up there as well.
Erica Haskell, probably in there somewhere. But
my wife have to be at the top of the list.
You were thinking the rule about no wives
I thought it
still
applied here too.
Yeah, no, I know. I wasn't clear about that. I should have been.
My wife's pretty incredible, and you haven't met my daughter yet, Isabel. You have to meet Isabel. Everyone who meets Isabel is pretty extraordinary. She's
They coming to the party?
Well, they'll be out of town, but I made them promise that they got to come over sometime this summer while
yeah,
they're
for
off.
sure.
And Izzy's everybody who meets Izzy's 6, but she's going to be president someday. I'm convinced.
All right.
She's got a real passion for life and very talkative and energetic and very positive, very happy child.
Awesome.
Yeah.
She has my vote. All right. The final lightning round question, and perhaps the most important, is describe an embarrassing thing that no one else knows about you. Or that almost no one knows about you.
Almost no one knows about me.
But preferably that no one knows about you.
An embarrassing thing that nobody knows about me.
Could be a story, could be that one day, I don't know. Could be anything.
Something that's kind of embarrassing, but some people do know that, and people who are really close to me know this about me. I have a little bit of a Halo problem. The Halo video game.
Is that right?
Yeah. So when that game came out, I played video games a lot when I was a kid, and when I was in college as a music major, I didn't play any because I just didn't have time. And then I got out of school, and I had a job, and I got married, I didn't have time. And I just who has time for video games? Are you kidding me? You're trying to be a professional musician. You should be practicing every free minute you had. And I did a good job with that. And then I went to law school and had kids. But I had seen this video game come out, Halo, and a really good friend of mine played it, and I took one look at it and I said, I'm never buying that, because if I ever buy that game, I will play it all the time. It is so cool. And so I didn't buy a copy of it until I don't know, 3 or 4 years ago. I finally bought like one copy of. By then they were on Halo 4, I think, and I bought Halo 3 or something. I started playing it, and yeah, it's pretty addictive. And
is that right?
Now I've got 4, I've got Reach, and now I've got Halo 5. That's the current one that's out. And I embarrassed to say, I do play a bit of Halo. That's a good stress reliever. It's a good escape.
Do you have the headset and you're talking to 12-year-olds staying up all night, right? Talking smack and.
A headset came with our Xbox when we bought it, and unfortunately, very few people online actually talk.
Oh, really?
And when they do, they tend to swear a bit. So I don't use the headset very often. I've used it a few times, and once in a while, there's someone on there who's sort of being a team player and saying encouraging things or saying things that are at least friendly and not spending a lot of time swearing. And it's kind of cool to play. In fact, I wish more people online would talk more. It would be more of a community.
I thought that was experience. The whole thing about Halo. I thought that World of Warcraft and all those games. I thought that's so that people could talk smack online.
I think they probably do. I don't know. I don't play those other games. They probably do, but for whatever reason in Halo they don't that much. Maybe it's ultra competitive. I'm not good at it at all. It's not. I mean, the people. I think you have to play hours a day to be good at it. I routinely get my butt kicked by everybody. So it's fun.
I told Jacob Gertzberg that if he meditated with me for 30 days straight for 10 minutes each session, that I would get him this thing called a Nintendo Switch. Do you know about the Nintendo Switch?
I've heard about this, but I don't.
Yeah, he's been bugging me for it, and I told him that's what he's got to do. He's got to meditate with me every day for 30 days, and we're on day 3 right now, and I've never been able to get him to meditate with me. Right.
Wow.
For more than once. So he really wants that Nintendo Switch. And I, like you, am concerned about my own addictive personality as it relates to video games. I tend not to even mess around with them because I will be. One time, he and I played Diablo. Do you ever play that game?
I've seen it. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. That was like a 5-hour odyssey. Right. And I was like, that's it. I'm not coming down to the basement ever again. Right. That was dumb.
But
it is fun. It was surprisingly good bonding. In that sense, and that's kind of why I went that in the meditation, why I'm going back to the Nintendo Switch concept, because I think it'll be good for us to spend some time together that way.
It's good. I have some of my fondest memories are just a few instances. My son and I don't play very often. He's 10. He's gotten into Star Wars Battlefront, which they don't have split screen in that, really, at least not online, which is horrible. But we've played Halo a little bit together, and I think some of my fondest memories are a couple of the afternoons where we played and just really had a good time. So it can be kind of a cool bonding thing.
All right, Nate. That was a successful lightning round. Well done.
Thank you.
So, before we wrap up, anything you'd like to put out there to the universe? Things that you're working on?
So you mentioned meditation, and this it's sort of a popular. It's a trend right now.
It is a trend right now, for sure.
But it's one that I believe in. Because I have some, in my martial arts background, I did some Qigong balance standing, which was pretty cool stuff way back in the day. And I've promised myself a few times I'm going to be better about meditating every day. And I haven't been great about it, but I'm getting there. And a friend of mine gave me a really good tip about it. We were talking about meditation, and he said, I was talking about the fact that, you're sitting there and you're supposed to not be thinking about anything. And when you're a lawyer, you tend to think in, like, you're very sort of goal-minded and competitive and achievement, minded. And so you're thinking, oh, I need to not think about anything. I need to have a blank slate. And when you're meditating and you have a thought come in and you have to get yourself back to, not having any thoughts come in, you tend to just think of it like it's a failure, like you just failed and now you're kind of have to start over. And I was talking to my friend about that, and he has a lot more experience meditating than I do. And I said, what am I really supposed to be doing? And he said, it doesn't matter whether a thought comes in or not. That's totally not the point. He said,
Right.
Don't worry about that. He said, the goal is you let the thought come in and then you let it go, and you don't attach any emotion to it.
Right.
And I went, oh, I get it. That makes a lot of sense. So that was really helpful to me in making meditation sessions productive.
Yeah. I would say, Nate, that meditation for me has been probably the single most impactful habit that I've ever started. You're doing a nonprofit seminar soon.
Yes.
On June 19th or July 9th? July 19th. Right. So I don't know that we'll talk about that. So what do we know? What do we not know?
So nonprofit seminar, Mark Turner and I, and Mark Turner is a litigator here, has some nonprofit experience, and I'm on the board of the Roberto Cosio Foundation. I was on the board of another nonprofit, Analog Arts Ensemble, which was doing some really neat things in the arts, and we'll be covering probably some crowdfunding, probably some like basic corporate governance, probably some unrelated business income. It's so easy for nonprofits to step into something, into a problem that they don't see them coming, and you don't want to get in a position where the IRS looks unfavorably at something that you did, and you often don't find out until it's too late, and there's not much you can do about however the deal was structured. So I think that'll be a great seminar. Really looking forward to it.
Yeah. So it's July 19th. There should be shortly information on the website, gertzberglaw.com, under events. It may not be up there yet, but it will be soon. So stay tuned for that. And we expect it to be at Township Hall in Chagrin Falls. We expect that it will start around 10 o'clock. So save the date if you're listening, if you're within earshot, put that on your calendars and check back onto the website. And I made a note because I remembered something. If you are selling hula hoops outside of Ohio, right, in addition to some of the things that we said, which is not a complete list, but if you sell enough hula hoops outside of Ohio, you might consider getting a nexus study done to determine whether you're subject to tax in those other states, which would require you to foreign qualify, file things with the Secretary of State there, and pay taxes or figure out a way to avoid them legally.
There's a similar issue in crowdfunding for nonprofits that we'll talk about at the seminar.
There you go. Go to the seminar and you'll learn about it. All right, Nate, that was awesome. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anytime.
And folks, thank you. If you've listened this long, you're a fan. So thank you, and we appreciate it. And we'll see you next time. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Nelly.